A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Well, you can't help but be disturbed by the images that we're seeing after the earthquake disaster in Myanmar, Burma. Well, destruction as far as 1,000 kilometres away, and the death toll continues to climb. The epicentre for the 7.7 magnitude earthquake was in Myanmar's second biggest city, Mandalay. Phil Lindsay is Effectiveness and Humanitarian Team Leader with the Christian agency Tearfund. Phil's joining us. Hey Phil, welcome along to 2020.
Thanks, Neil. It's great to be able to talk with you about this.
Phil, you have an ear to the ground. You spend a lot of time in Southeast Asia. What are you hearing from your teams on the ground in Myanmar?
So we're hearing directly from our partners there in Myanmar that the situation continues to evolve as the more remote areas get in contact. But certainly the destruction is widespread. Many people are sleeping outdoors. They're either afraid of being indoors or they're unable to sleep within their houses because of damage. It's also really hot, and water is a significant problem, safe drinking water. So people are struggling with dehydration and just knowing how to keep cool. And then, of course, you've got the heat. You've got sadly, many dead bodies that are still being recovered, and those that have been recovered already. So it's a complex and really difficult situation.
Do you think it is the case that no one really knows the extent of this disaster? Every figure we hear is really an estimate, because when you get an earthquake of that magnitude and experienced 1,000 kilometres away, there's an awful lot of poor people or people who work in an agrarian society. They're working in fields. They may not be counted in the same way we think people are counted. Is it true that no one will really know what the numbers are?
Not for some time, sure, certainly. In the remote villages, it will take some time for information to come through. I know that our partner and others are doing needs assessments as broadly and as widely as they can, and that will include trying to ascertain numbers of missing people or those who have died. And as well, we need to remember that Myanmar it's one country, and yet it is divided as well. And so official figures that are released by the military government in Yangon will not include many of those people who have been affected in the areas that are controlled by the ethnic groups around the country. And that's at least a quarter to a half of the country as well.
As you say, the military junta that controls Myanmar, have they been a little looser, a little more welcoming of overseas disaster relief, because they've been very closed up until this point?
Yes, you're right. They have requested international assistance. It's yet to be seen how open they are to international organisations coming in, particularly new ones. And also, it's being tested now as to how much they'll allow access out of their controlled areas into the other areas. The partner that we are working with and have worked with since the mid-1990s is well embedded within the country and has work in both areas. And so they're able to implement their operations and their activities across their working areas. And other organisations I've heard of who are already there are able to work. How much they'll allow new organisations to come in is yet to be tested.
And while we're hearing the death toll rising, the numbers of people impacted by this disaster, the sheer scale of it, a 7.7 magnitude earthquake, I understand there are estimates that over 20 million people may be impacted, because it's not just those who die and lose their lives, it's people who've lost a family member, or a whole lot of issues around the losses of business, and the losses of all of the community connections. How do you describe the impact?
Massive. And unless you're in the midst of a situation like that, it's really hard to imagine what it would be like. Before the earthquake occurred, there were nearly 20 million people who were already suffering from lack of food and essential facilities like education and healthcare. So the earthquake has just amplified that situation even more. I mean, 7.6 million people is the number that I've heard of urgent need in life-saving assistance, and that's beyond the sort of chronic level of need that was there prior to the earthquake. So that, yeah, the magnitude of it is massive.
The very fact that you've got workers with Tearfund on the ground in Myanmar, even some of those have been affected. That's the word you've received.
Oh yes, I was with the country director last week of our partner in Myanmar. She's Burmese herself and has family there. And as the news came through, she was trying to get in touch with her team members, with her family, and they are all affected. Her house has been severely damaged. Her mother is living with no clean water and no electricity. Trying to get hold of people is really difficult. So it's one of those situations where people are trying to respond within their community, and yet they're also dealing with the impact of the disaster themselves on their own family and on themselves. So we really need to be thinking about remembering and praying for those who are responding, because it's more than just doing their work. It's trying to support their own families and themselves as they respond to this as well.
Phil, what do you identify as the needs? Not only one organisation just can't deal with all of the scale of this disaster, but what needs are you working with Tearfund that might make a difference?
The immediate needs, I mean, there are going to be ongoing needs. The need for ongoing recovery will be years, but the immediate needs are very basic: food, clean drinking water, sanitation facilities. So our partner is planning to put in temporary water tanks for clean drinking water for people, community latrines, communal latrines, because plumbing and household toilets have been damaged or destroyed. Mosquito nets, it's, as I said before, it's very hot and people are sleeping outdoors, so they need to be sheltered from basic stuff like mosquitoes so that we can keep diseases down. Medical attention, obviously, and also support psychologically. It's a traumatizing event, and if you've been through a really large earthquake, you'll know that what do you do when you can't even trust the ground that you're walking on? And so people, as well as dealing with the tragedy of it, are having to deal with some basic traumatizing sort of situations. And so supporting people with basic counselling and helping them support one another is going to be an important part of that, as well as all of those essential supplies.
Phil, there is a Tearfund appeal, and I'll ask listeners to respond to that. But just before I give the website, how do you want Christian believers to pray into the situation that's going on in Myanmar?
I received a message last night from our partner's country director, and she said, your prayers are so important to us. Remembering to bring all of those who are affected and those who are responding to God and asking for strength. It's exhausting work. It's both physically and emotionally exhausting. So asking for strength, asking for wisdom in prioritizing who is most needy when everyone has a need, and how do you best use those resources? They're really, really important ways, I think. In terms of the appeal, people might think, oh, I haven't got much to give, but about $55, $60 will provide essential food supplies, packages, and hygiene packages, mosquito nets, things like that for someone. So every little bit will make a significant difference.
Okay.
So everyone can be a part of this.
Something like $55 or $60 food and hygiene needs to be met. Let me point listeners to the website tearfund.org.au. That's the Australian website for Tearfund, tearfund.org.au. Phil Lindsay is the Effectiveness and Humanitarian Team Leader with the Christian agency Tearfund. Phil, thanks so much for giving us an update on what's going on in Myanmar for today's 2020.
Thanks so much for the opportunity. Thanks, Neil.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.